Mother Bear rushed to save a drowning toddler. What happened when they reached shore? Shocked the crowd. Let us know where you're watching from. If you loved my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Every bit of your support helps us create even more amazing stories for you. The morning sun painted golden streaks across Pine Lake as families set up their picnic blankets along the shore. The calm water sparkled like diamonds, hiding its dangerous depths beneath a peaceful surface. On this perfect summer day, no one expected their lives would change forever. Olivia Chen watched her 3-year-old son Noah play with his plastic bucket near the edge of their blanket. She turned away for just a moment to pour juice into a cup, the sweet smell of apple mixing with the scent of pine trees. When she looked back, Noah was gone. "Noah?" Olivia called, her voice still calm. She stood up, scanning the area, expecting to see his blue-striped shirt somewhere nearby. "Noah!" she called again, louder this time. Her heart started beating faster. Parents around her continued chatting, their laughter floating through the air, unaware of the storm building inside her chest. Then she heard it, a splash followed by silence. Olivia's eyes snapped toward the water just in time to see tiny arms disappearing beneath the surface, 20 feet from shore. "My baby!" she screamed, kicking off her sandals as she raced toward the water. Her scream cut through the peaceful morning like a knife, turning heads and stopping conversations mid-sentence. "He's drowning! Help!" Mason Reed, a forest ranger who had been checking fishing permits down the shore, dropped his clipboard and sprinted toward the commotion. He knew the lake better than anyone, knew its sudden drop-offs, its cold currents that could pull even strong swimmers under. The spot where the child had gone under was one of the deepest. "Stay back!" Mason shouted to Olivia as he kicked off his boots. "I'll get him." But even as the words left his mouth, he wondered if he would be fast enough. Precious seconds had already passed. In the woods just beyond the beach, a mother black bear and her 2 cubs froze at the sound of the human screams. The mother bear lifted her head, her sensitive ears twitching. Most wild animals would retreat deeper into the forest, away from human chaos. But something in the high-pitched screams pulled at her. Something ancient and powerful stirred inside her chest. Back at the shore, Olivia stumbled into the water, her legs moving too slowly against the resistance. Other picnickers stood frozen in shock. A man with a gray beard dove in from further down the shore, but everyone knew he was too far away. Mason plunged into the deep water, powerful arms cutting through the surface, eyes desperately searching for any sign of the boy beneath the now disturbed lake. No one noticed the large shape emerging from the tree line. No one saw the mother bear pause at the edge of the woods, her cubs whimpering behind her. No one watched as she sniffed the air, her dark eyes fixed on the spot where the small human had disappeared. And then she moved. The bear charged straight for the water, her massive body breaking into a full run that shook the ground. People finally noticed, their screams changing from concern to terror, as a 350-pound black bear barreled directly toward them. "Bear!" someone shouted. Parents grabbed their children. Picnickers abandoned their blankets, scrambling backward in panic, but the bear wasn't charging at them. Without slowing, she plunged into the lake, her powerful body cutting through the water with surprising speed and grace, heading directly toward the spot where Noah had vanished. Olivia, waist deep in the lake, saw the bear coming and froze in a new kind of horror. Mason, swimming hard, spotted the dark shape moving through the water and felt his blood turn cold. He was too far, too late, and now this. The worst possible nightmare was unfolding before their eyes. The bear reached the spot first. She dove beneath the surface, disappearing completely. The entire shoreline fell into shocked silence. Seconds stretched into eternity. The surface of the water rippled, then stilled. Olivia's scream died in her throat, replaced by a primal whimper as she stared at the spot where both her son and the bear had disappeared. Mason treaded water, his eyes wide with disbelief, unsure whether to swim toward the danger or retreat to safety. "Please," Olivia whispered, the word barely audible. "Please, please, please." The surface broke. First came the bear's massive head, water streaming from her dark fur like a waterfall. Then, clutched gently in her powerful jaws, held by the back of his soaked blue-striped shirt, was Noah. The bear's teeth had pierced the fabric, but hadn't touched the child's skin. Noah's eyes were closed, his small body limp. Gasps erupted from the shore. Phones recorded the unbelievable scene. Some people cried out warnings, others simply cried. The bear began swimming toward the shore, Noah dangling from her mouth like one of her own cubs. Each powerful stroke brought them closer to land, to the humans who stood paralyzed between fear and hope. "She's bringing him back," Mason said in disbelief, treading water a safe distance away. "Don't anybody move." Olivia couldn't follow that instruction. She splashed forward, wading deeper despite hands that reached to hold her back. "Ma'am, stop!" Mason shouted. "Let the bear! That's my son!" Olivia cried, breaking free from restraining hands. The bear reached the shallows, her massive paws finding purchase on the lake bottom. She walked the last few yards with her head held high, keeping Noah above the water. When she reached the place where the water met the shore, she carefully lowered the boy onto the wet sand. Noah wasn't moving. The crowd held its collective breath. The bear nudged Noah's small chest with her snout, then looked up at the humans, her dark eyes somehow conveying urgency. She took a step back, then another, creating distance but not leaving. Olivia rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside Noah. "He's not breathing," she sobbed, her hands shaking too badly to help her son. An elderly woman pushed through the crowd. "I was a nurse for 40 years, she announced, kneeling beside Olivia. "Let me help." Her name was Eleanor Walsh, and she had been painting the lake scene before chaos erupted. Now her steady hands turned Noah onto his side, allowing water to drain from his mouth and nose. The bear watched, her massive head tilted as if monitoring the situation. Her cubs had emerged from the tree line and were whimpering at the edge of the forest, but the mother didn't return to them. She stood guard, watching intently as Eleanor performed CPR on the tiny body. "Come on, little one," Eleanor muttered as she pressed rhythmically on Noah's chest. "Come back to us." Mason had reached the shore and now stood between the bear and the humans, his hands raised in a non-threatening gesture toward the animal. "Nobody make any sudden movements," he warned, though his voice trembled. "This is unprecedented." Noah's body suddenly convulsed. He coughed violently, water spewing from his mouth and nose. Eleanor quickly turned him onto his side as he vomited lake water. "That's it, sweetie," Eleanor encouraged. "Get it all out." Olivia collapsed beside her son, tears streaming down her face. "Noah! Oh God, Noah!" The little boy's eyes fluttered open, confused and frightened. "Mommy!" he wheezed. A cheer erupted from the crowd. People embraced each other, crying and laughing in relief. But their celebration was short-lived. The bear suddenly growled, a deep rumbling sound that silenced everyone instantly. But she wasn't looking at the humans or Noah. Her attention had shifted to the parking lot beyond the beach. A pickup truck had arrived, and a man was stepping out, rifle in hand. He'd seen the bear and was raising his weapon. "No!" Mason shouted, waving his arms frantically. "Put that down!" The bear's posture changed. She dropped lower, protective, her eyes never leaving the rifle. Her cubs sensed the danger and darted back into the woods, but the mother held her ground. "She saved that child," Eleanor called out. "Don't you dare shoot!" The man with the rifle, Park Security Officer Damon Tucker, hesitated, his finger on the trigger. "It's a wild animal," he called back. "It's a danger to everyone here." "Lower your weapon, Tucker," Mason commanded, using the authority in his voice as head ranger. "That's an order." Noah, still weak but now conscious, turned his head toward the bear. His small hand reached out. Not in fear, but in wonder. "Bear," he said simply. What happened next left even the most skeptical witnesses questioning everything they thought they knew about wild animals. The mother bear turned from the threat of the rifle and looked directly at Noah. Their eyes met, innocent child and wild mother, in a moment of connection that transcended species. Then, with deliberate gentleness that belied her massive size, the bear dipped her head in what could only be described as a nod. Noah smiled. "Thank you," he whispered, words he had just learned recently and used sparingly. The bear made a soft chuffing sound. She turned, glancing once more at the man with the rifle, then lumbered back toward the tree line where her anxious cubs waited. The three bears disappeared into the dense forest, leaving behind a crowd of humans forever changed by what they had witnessed. Damon Tucker lowered his rifle, his hand shaking. I've never. He couldn't complete his thought. A heavy silence fell over the beach. The usual sounds returned, birds calling, water lapping at the shore, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, but everything felt different, as if the world had shifted on its axis. Olivia held Noah tightly against her chest, rocking back and forth. "You're safe," she whispered into his wet hair. "You're safe." But something tugged at her mind, a strange feeling she couldn't ignore. She looked toward the forest where the bear had disappeared. That animal had done something no human had been able to do, save her son from certain drowning. The bear had risked her own life, abandoned her cubs temporarily, all to rescue a human child. "Why?" Olivia whispered, not expecting an answer. Why would she do that? Eleanor, the retired nurse, placed a gentle hand on Olivia's shoulder. "Animals understand more than we give them credit for," she said softly. "That bear is a mother, too." Mason was already on his radio, reporting the incident to park headquarters. "No, sir," he said firmly. "The bear is not to be tracked or harmed in any way. She saved a human life today." He paused, listening. "Yes, sir, I know how it sounds. But I saw it with my own eyes. We all did." News of the rescue spread through the campground like wildfire. By late afternoon, park rangers had established a protective perimeter around the beach. Wildlife officials arrived, clipboard in hand, asking questions no one knew how to answer. How had the bear known the child was in danger? Why had she chosen to help rather than stay with her cubs? Was there any explanation besides pure coincidence? But Olivia knew what she had seen. As paramedics examined Noah in the back of an ambulance, she stepped away to speak privately with Mason. "Something's not right," she said quietly, glancing around to ensure they wouldn't be overheard. The way that bear looked at Noah, the way she nodded at him, that wasn't normal. Mason ran a hand through his damp hair. "None of this is normal, Mrs. Chen. I've worked these woods for 15 years. Bears don't save people. They just don't." "Then why did she?" Mason shook his head. "I wish I knew. But there's something else bothering me. That spot where Noah fell in, it's not on any of the regular bear paths. They don't usually come this close to the camping areas, especially with cubs." Olivia felt a chill that had nothing to do with her wet clothes. "Do you think—" She couldn't finish the question. Mason understood anyway. "I think there's more to this story than we understand, and I intend to find out what it is." As twilight descended on Pine Lake, most campers packed up and left, too shaken by the day's events to enjoy the wilderness. But a few remained, drawn by curiosity or something deeper. They gathered around campfires, voices hushed as they retold what they had witnessed. Olivia sat beside Noah's hospital bed in the small regional medical center, watching his chest rise and fall with each precious breath. The doctors wanted to keep him overnight for observation, though, remarkably, he had suffered no lasting physical damage from his near drowning. She gently stroked his hair, wondering how to process what had happened. Her phone had been buzzing non-stop with messages from news outlets seeking interviews. The story was too extraordinary not to spread. The video someone had captured of the bear swimming with Noah in her jaws had already gone viral. Just as Noah drifted to sleep, a light knock came at the door. Mason entered, still in his damp ranger uniform. "How is he?" Mason asked softly. "Physically fine," Olivia answered. "Emotionally, I don't know. He keeps asking about the bear." Mason nodded, then hesitated. "Mrs. Chen, there's something you should know." He pulled a chair closer to the bed and lowered his voice. "I went back to the spot in the woods where the bear emerged with her cubs. I found something unusual." Olivia leaned forward. What was it? An old cabin foundation. According to park records, it burned down nearly 30 years ago. A family used to live there, the Wilsons. They had a daughter named Rebecca, who worked as a wildlife researcher specializing in bear behavior. "What happened to her?" Mason's face grew solemn. "She died in an accident at the lake. Drowned trying to save a bear cub that had fallen through ice in winter." Olivia felt goosebumps rise on her arms. "That's just a coincidence, right?" "Maybe, but here's the strange part. The records show Rebecca had somehow formed a unique bond with a particular female bear. She'd been studying it for years. After Rebecca died, that bear was often seen near the spot where she drowned." "You think today's bear could be related to that one? After all these years?" Mason shrugged. "Bears can live 20 to 30 years in the wild. Cubs learn territory from their mothers." He paused. "But there's one more thing. I found this in the ruins of the cabin." He pulled out a small, partially burnt photograph protected in a plastic evidence bag. Olivia took it with trembling hands. The faded image showed a smiling woman in her 30s with a small black bear cub. Around the woman's neck was a distinctive pendant, a silver bear paw print. "Rebecca Wilson wore that necklace all the time, according to old-timers who knew her," Mason explained. "Never took it off." Noah stirred in his sleep, drawing Olivia's attention. She gasped. Around her son's neck, previously hidden by his hospital gown, was a small silver pendant. A bear paw. "That's not his," Olivia whispered, her voice shaking. "He wasn't wearing any jewelry this morning." Mason stared at the pendant, then at the photograph, his face pale in the dim hospital light. "What does it mean?" Olivia asked, her voice barely audible. Before Mason could answer, Noah's eyes opened. He looked directly at them, a strangely peaceful expression on his face. "The bear lady said I'll be okay now," he murmured sleepily. "She said, 'Thank you for remembering.'" Olivia and Mason exchanged shocked glances. Noah had been unconscious when rescued. He couldn't have heard anyone saying those things. "Who is the bear lady, sweetheart?" Olivia asked carefully. Noah's eyes were already closing again, sleep reclaiming him. "The lady in the water," he mumbled. "The one who sent the bear to save me." As Noah drifted back to sleep, the silver paw print pendant gleamed in the dim light, a bridge between worlds that science couldn't explain. But a mother's heart somehow understood. Outside the hospital window, at the edge of the forest visible in the distance, a large shadow moved among the trees. For just a moment it paused, as if looking toward the hospital window. Then it disappeared into the darkness of the ancient woods, where some mysteries are meant to remain wild and free. The next morning, Noah awoke refreshed, with no memory of his mysterious words about the bear lady. The doctors examined him one final time, marveling at his complete recovery, and released him with instructions for Olivia to watch for any delayed symptoms of near drowning. "It's honestly remarkable, Doctor," Sophia Martinez told Olivia as they completed the discharge paperwork. "Children who spend that long underwater typically show some signs of hypoxia, oxygen deprivation, but Noah's scans are perfect." She hesitated, then added, "The nurses are calling it the miracle at Pine Lake." Olivia signed the last form and glanced at Noah, who was happily coloring a picture of a bear that one of the nurses had printed for him. The silver paw pendant still hung around his neck, catching the light whenever he moved. She had tried to remove it while he slept, curious about its origin, but the clasp had stubbornly refused to open. "Dr. Martinez," Olivia said quietly, "have you ever heard of Rebecca Wilson?" The doctor's pen paused mid-signature. Her eyes widened slightly before she composed herself. "Where did you hear that name?" "The park ranger mentioned her. She was a researcher who drowned in the lake years ago." Dr. Martinez set down her pen and glanced at the door, ensuring they had privacy. "Rebecca Wilson wasn't just any researcher," she said, her voice lowered. "She was my aunt. I was only 10 when she died, but I remember her stories about the bears, especially one female she called Alma. My parents thought she was eccentric, too attached to wild animals." She paused. "After the accident, some local people claimed they saw her spirit near the lake, but of course, and that was just grief talking." Olivia felt her skin prickle. "Your aunt, did she wear a pendant? Like this one?" She gestured toward Noah's necklace. Dr. Martinez's face drained of color. "Where did you get that?" "That's my aunt's pendant. I'd recognize it anywhere. She had it custom-made after her first successful bear study." She stepped closer, examining the silver paw print without touching it. "This is impossible. That pendant was buried with her." A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by Noah's cheerful humming as he colored his bear picture, oblivious to the adults' conversation. "I think," Olivia said carefully, "something extraordinary happened yesterday. Something beyond what we can explain." Dr. Martinez nodded slowly. "I think you're right, and I think you should talk to my grandmother, Rebecca's mother. She's 92 now, but her mind is still sharp. If anyone might understand what's happening, it's her." As they left the hospital, a crowd of reporters surged forward, cameras flashing. The story had exploded overnight, with headlines proclaiming "Mother Bear saves child from drowning," and "Miracle at Pine Lake, wild animal performs human rescue." Mason appeared, using his ranger authority to clear a path for them to his truck. "Mrs. Chen, I can take you and Noah somewhere quiet until this dies down," he offered, shielding them from the cameras. "Actually," Olivia said, "we need to visit someone first. Eleanor Walsh, do you know where she lives?" Mason looked surprised. "The retired nurse who helped with Noah. She has a cabin about 20 minutes from here, but why? And after that, we need to meet Dr. Martinez's grandmother," Olivia continued, her voice determined. "I think they might have answers about what really happened yesterday." Mason studied her face. You felt it too, didn't you? That this wasn't just a random act of animal behavior? I know it wasn't, Olivia replied, her hand instinctively touching Noah's pendant. Eleanor Walsh's cabin sat nestled among towering pines, its weathered wooden exterior blending with the forest around it. Wind chimes made from antlers and polished stones hung from the porch, creating an ethereal melody in the gentle breeze. Eleanor answered their knock, wearing paint-stained overalls, her silver hair pulled back in a loose bun. She didn't seem surprised to see them. "I've been expecting you," she said simply, holding the door open wider. "Come in." The cabin's interior was warm and filled with artwork. Paintings of the forest, the lake, and its wildlife covered nearly every wall. But one painting, positioned prominently above the stone fireplace, captured Olivia's attention immediately. It showed a woman standing knee-deep in Pine Lake, her hand extended toward a large black bear that was swimming toward her. Around the woman's neck was a silver pendant, clearly visible despite the painting's dreamlike quality. "That's Rebecca Wilson," Eleanor said, following Olivia's gaze. "I painted that the summer before she died." Noah broke away from his mother and walked straight to the painting. "Bear lady," he said, pointing at the image of Rebecca. Eleanor knelt beside him, her eyes intense. "You've seen her, haven't you, child?" Noah nodded. In the water, she was bright. Mason shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Walsh, what's going on here?" Eleanor gestured for them to sit. "I've lived in these woods for over 40 years. I've seen things that defy explanation." She gazed at Noah with a gentle smile. "But nothing quite like this." She walked to an old wooden chest and removed a leather-bound journal. "Rebecca gave me this before she died. She wanted someone to continue her research if anything happened to her." She opened it carefully, revealing pages of handwritten notes and sketches of bears. She discovered something about the bears in this forest, particularly about the female she called Alma. "What did she discover?" Olivia asked. "That these bears possess a form of intelligence, perhaps even spirituality, that science hasn't been able to recognize or measure." She documented multiple instances of complex problem-solving, empathy, and what appeared to be ritual behaviors around certain parts of the forest. Eleanor turned several pages, showing detailed observations. The scientific community ridiculed her theories, called her work anthropomorphic nonsense. But she knew what she'd seen. Mason leaned forward. "And you believe her research was valid?" "I believe that nature contains mysteries we've barely begun to understand," Eleanor replied. "And I believe what happened yesterday wasn't the first time the bears of this forest have intervened in human affairs." She showed them a newspaper clipping from 1978, yellowed with age. The headline read, "Local child found after 3 days lost in woods, claims bear led him to safety." "That child was my brother," Eleanor said quietly. "I was 16 when it happened. Nobody believed his story. They assumed he was confused from dehydration and fear. But I believed him. And when I met Rebecca years later, I recognized the truth in her work." Noah, who had been examining Eleanor's paintings, suddenly turned toward the window. "She's here," he said, his voice filled with certainty. Everyone followed his gaze. At the edge of the clearing around Eleanor's cabin stood the mother bear, instantly recognizable by a distinctive white patch on her chest. She was alone, without her cubs, standing perfectly still as she stared at the cabin. "Alma's descendant," Eleanor whispered. "She followed you here." Mason instinctively moved toward his service weapon, but Eleanor stopped him with a firm hand on his arm. "Number, she means no harm." "How can you be sure?" Olivia asked, pulling Noah protectively closer. Because she's here for a reason, Eleanor said, and I think it has to do with that pendant. The bear took 3 steps forward, then sat on her haunches, still watching the cabin. The posture was so unbear-like, so deliberate, that even Mason was rendered speechless. I need to go outside, Noah said suddenly, trying to pull away from his mother. Absolutely not, Olivia responded, tightening her grip on his hand. Eleanor turned to her. Mrs. Chen, I know this goes against every maternal instinct you have, but I believe your son is part of something important, something that began decades ago with Rebecca and doesn't seem to be finished. You're asking me to let my 3-year-old approach a wild bear after he nearly died yesterday? Olivia's voice rose in disbelief. I'm suggesting, Eleanor said gently, that the bear who saved your son's life hasn't completed whatever task brought her to him. And that pendant is the key. Mason ran a hand through his hair. This is insane. We should be calling wildlife control, not considering sending a child out there. Yet something deep inside Olivia, the same instinct that had alerted her to Noah's absence at the lake, was telling her that Eleanor might be right. The bear had saved Noah once. She could have disappeared back into the forest, never to be seen again. Instead, she had tracked them here, waiting patiently outside the cabin. I'll go with him, Olivia decided, her voice surprisingly steady. We'll stay on the porch. If the bear makes any threatening move, we come straight back inside. Mason looked like he wanted to object, but instead moved to the door. I'll be right beside you, hand on my weapon the entire time. They stepped onto the porch, Noah between Olivia and Mason, with Eleanor watching anxiously from the doorway. The bear remained sitting, her dark eyes fixed on Noah. The pendant, Eleanor called softly from behind them. Show her the pendant, Noah. With small, curious fingers, Noah lifted the silver paw print from his chest, holding it out toward the bear. Sunlight caught the polished surface, sending a bright reflection across the clearing. The bear rose to all fours and approached slowly, stopping about 10 feet from the porch steps. She made a soft chuffing sound, then did something extraordinary. She pawed at her own chest, where a patch of white fur formed a pattern not unlike the paw print pendant. "Oh my God," Mason whispered. Noah smiled. "She wants to show us something," he said, with the simple confidence of a child. He took a step down from the porch. "Noah," Olivia hissed, grabbing for him, but he had already descended another step. "It's okay, Mommy," he said, not looking back. "The bear lady says it's important." The bear turned and took a few steps toward the forest, then looked back, clearly waiting. Noah continued down the steps, the pendant gleaming against his T-shirt. Olivia followed, her heart hammering in her chest. Mason stayed close, his hand on his holstered weapon, face tense with concentration. The bear led them to the forest edge, maintaining a distance of about 15 feet. She would walk a short way, then stop and look back, ensuring they were following. Noah showed no fear, walking with purpose as if understanding some silent communication. "Where is she taking us?" Olivia whispered to Mason. "I don't know, but we're still within sight of the cabin," he replied, keeping his voice low and calm despite the extraordinary situation. "I'll make sure you both stay safe." They walked for about 10 minutes, following a path that grew increasingly narrow. The forest canopy thickened overhead, dappling the ground with patterns of light and shadow. Birds fell silent as they passed, creating an unnatural quiet broken only by their footsteps and the occasional sound of the bear moving ahead of them. Finally, they reached a small clearing. In its center stood an ancient oak tree, its massive trunk split down the middle by what must have been lightning decades ago. The bear walked to the tree and rose on her hind legs, placing her front paws against the trunk. She looked back at Noah. Without hesitation, the boy walked forward. Olivia moved to stop him, but Mason placed a gentle hand on her arm. "Wait," he whispered. "Look." Inside the split trunk, visible now that they were closer, was a small hollow. Noah reached inside and withdrew a metal box, tarnished green with age. The bear dropped back to all fours and made a soft sound, almost like a sigh. "What is it?" Olivia asked, kneeling beside Noah as he set the box on the ground. The box was locked, but as Noah touched the clasp with the paw print pendant, there was a soft click. The lid opened, revealing contents preserved from the elements by the waterproof seal. Inside was a leather-bound journal similar to the one Eleanor had shown them, several photographs, and a sealed letter with "For whoever follows" written across the front in faded ink. "Rebecca's research," Mason breathed, examining the journal without touching it. "Her complete findings." The bear watched them intently, her intelligent eyes never leaving the box. Noah picked up one of the photographs. It showed a much younger Rebecca Wilson standing beside a black bear cub. On the back was written, "Alma, 3 months old, rescued after mother was killed by poachers. First day of our journey together." With trembling fingers, Olivia opened the sealed letter. The paper was brittle but intact, the handwriting elegant and precise. "To whoever finds this, if you're reading these words, then the guardians of Pine Forest have chosen you. The bears here are unlike any others I've studied. They possess a wisdom and awareness that defies our limited understanding of animal consciousness. For 5 years, I've documented their behavior, particularly that of Alma and her first litter. I've witnessed them perform acts that can only be described as altruistic, not just toward each other, but across species barriers. They remember kindnesses and injuries across generations. They teach their young not just how to survive, but how to coexist. My colleagues call me delusional, but I know what I've seen. There is something sacred in these woods, something that connects all living beings in ways science has yet to comprehend. If this box has been revealed to you, it means you've experienced something extraordinary involving the bears. It means you're now part of their story, as I have been. The pendant you now possess is more than jewelry. The local indigenous people crafted it generations ago as a symbol of protection and connection to the bear spirits they believed guarded these forests. I've worn it since the day Alma came into my life. Protect these bears, tell their true story, and remember that in a world that separates humans from nature, there exist bridges between worlds, if only we're brave enough to cross them. With hope for understanding, Rebecca Wilson. Olivia looked up from the letter to find the bear still watching them, her eyes somehow knowing. Behind them came the sound of footsteps. Eleanor Walsh had followed them into the forest. "You found it," she said, looking at the open box, "after all these years." "You knew about this?" Mason asked. Eleanor nodded. "Rebecca told me she had hidden her most important findings somewhere in the forest. She said when the time was right, they would be found." She looked at the bear with something like reverence. She also said Alma would make sure of it. The bear, possibly Alma's daughter or granddaughter, made a soft huffing sound. She backed away slowly, then turned and disappeared into the trees, her purpose apparently fulfilled. Noah touched the pendant at his chest, then looked up at his mother with eyes that seemed older than his years. "The bear lady says we need to tell everyone the truth." "What truth, sweetie?" Olivia asked, still struggling to process everything that had happened. "That the bears are special. That they remember." He looked toward where the bear had vanished. "And that they saved me because someone saved them a long time ago." As they walked back to Eleanor's cabin, the forest around them seemed different somehow, more alive, more aware. The journal and letter in Olivia's hands contained a story the world wasn't ready to hear, about intelligence and compassion existing where humans had never thought to look for it. 3 days later, after the media frenzy had begun to subside, Olivia sat on the porch of a rented lakeside cabin, watching Noah play with pine cones in the yard. They had decided to stay near Pine Lake a while longer, drawn by forces neither of them fully understood. Dr. Martinez's grandmother, Rebecca's mother, had confirmed everything in the letter. "My daughter wasn't crazy," the elderly woman had said fiercely. "She understood something about those bears that science wasn't ready to accept." The pendant still hung around Noah's neck, and sometimes Olivia caught him talking to it, as if communicating with someone only he could see or hear. She had stopped questioning these moments, accepting that some mysteries weren't meant to be fully understood. Mason appeared at the edge of the property, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Chen," he called, approaching with purpose in his stride. "We've got a situation." "What kind of situation?" Olivia asked, instantly alert. "The Forest Service is planning to approve a logging operation that would cut through the heart of the bear's territory," he explained, showing her a map. "I've been fighting it for months, but now they're fast-tracking the permits because of some political pressure." "They can't do that," Olivia said, feeling a strange protective anger rise within her. "Not after what happened. Those bears are special." Mason nodded grimly. "I agree, but the higher-ups see dollar signs, not bear spirits. They're calling what happened with Noah a freak occurrence. Probably a bear that was accidentally habituated to humans." Noah had stopped playing and was watching them intently. "The bears need help," he said simply. Olivia looked from her son to Mason, then to the forest beyond. She thought about Rebecca's letter, about bridges between worlds and responsibilities that came with understanding. "Then we'll help them," she decided, her voice firm with newfound purpose. "We have Rebecca's research, Eleanor's testimony, and video evidence of the rescue. Plus," she added, touching Noah's pendant, "we have something they don't have. Proof that there's more to these bears than science can explain." Mason's expression shifted from concern to determination. "It won't be easy. We'll be going up against powerful logging interests and skeptical wildlife officials. Nothing worthwhile ever is easy," Olivia replied, thinking of how close she had come to losing Noah. "My son is alive because of those bears. I owe them everything." As the sun began to set over Pine Lake, casting long shadows across the water, a silent figure watched from the tree line. The mother bear stood motionless, observing the humans on the porch as they bent over maps and papers, planning a defense for her forest home. Around her neck, barely visible against her dark fur, was a thin leather cord, and hanging from it, impossible as it seemed, was a small silver object that caught the fading light. The circle that had begun with Rebecca Wilson decades ago was now complete. The guardians of Pine Forest had chosen new allies in their ancient task of protection and remembrance, and somewhere between the world of humans and the realm of wild things, bridges were being built that would change both forever. Noah looked up from the porch and waved toward the trees. The bear raised her head slightly, acknowledging the child whose life path had become mysteriously intertwined with her own. Then she turned and melted into the gathering darkness, a spirit of the forest returning to secrets that had existed long before humans had named this place. But this time, she left something behind, understanding in the hearts of those who had witnessed something miraculous, and in the mind of a small boy who would never again see the boundary between humans and nature in quite the same way. The pendant around Noah's neck gleamed one final time in the day's last light. a small silver paw print that had once hung around the neck of a woman who had dared to believe that animals could think, feel, and remember. That they could choose compassion over instinct, that they could save a drowning child out of something like love, and that some mysteries are better left wild and free, even as they change us forever. 6 months later, the small community center near Pine Lake was filled beyond capacity. People spilled out onto the lawn, straining to hear through open windows as Olivia Chen addressed the town council and Forest Service representatives. "The evidence is irrefutable," she said, her voice steady as she stood beside a projection screen showing footage of the bear rescue. "These are not ordinary bears. The research of Dr. Rebecca Wilson, which was decades ahead of its time, proves they possess cognitive abilities far beyond what science has acknowledged." Noah sat in the front row between Mason and Eleanor, the silver paw print pendant still hanging around his neck. He had grown in the past months, not just physically but in a quiet maturity that sometimes unsettled Olivia. He spoke often of the bear lady, conversations with someone only he could see. At the back of the room, Dr. Sophia Martinez watched with professional interest. After reading her aunt's recovered journals, she had taken a sabbatical from the hospital to conduct her own research on the Pine Lake bears, bringing modern scientific methods to continue Rebecca's work. "The proposed logging would destroy not just trees," Olivia continued, "but a unique ecosystem where something extraordinary has evolved. A relationship between species that deserves our protection and study." A heavy-set man in an expensive suit stood up, his face flushed with impatience. "Mrs. Chen, while your son's rescue was certainly remarkable, one bear's unusual behavior doesn't justify halting a multi-million-dollar development project. Northwest Timber has followed every environmental regulation." This was Gregory Harmon, CEO of Northwest Timber, who had driven up from Portland for the meeting. His company had been pushing hard for access to the old-growth forest that surrounded much of Pine Lake. Eleanor Walsh rose from her seat, leaning on her cane. At 78, she commanded respect from most of the locals who had known her for decades. "This isn't about one bear or one incident," she said firmly. "Some of us have witnessed the special nature of these bears for generations. My own brother was saved by one in 1978. Rebecca Wilson documented dozens of cases before her death. Anecdotes and sentimentality," Harmon dismissed with a wave of his hand. "I sympathize with your attachment to local folklore, Miss Walsh, but this is about progress and jobs for the community." A murmur ran through the crowd. The promise of jobs had divided the town, with many people torn between economic opportunity and the growing sense that something truly unique existed in their forest. Noah suddenly stood up. The room fell silent as the small boy walked to the center of the floor. Olivia started to follow, but Mason gently held her back. "Let him speak," he whispered. "Trust me." Noah looked directly at Harmon, his young face solemn. "The bears protected us," he said simply. "Now we need to protect them." Harmon's expression softened slightly, confronted with the child who had been at the center of the miracle. "Son, I understand you feel connected to these animals after what happened. That's natural. But they're not just animals," Noah interrupted, with a certainty that silenced the room. "They remember. They know things." He touched his pendant. "And they're not the only ones who live in the forest." A confused murmur spread through the audience. "What do you mean, Noah?" asked Councilwoman Patricia Green, leaning forward with interest. "The bear lady showed me," Noah replied. "There are others. Watching. Waiting to see what we'll do." Eleanor and Mason exchanged meaningful glances. They had heard Noah mention others before, but had assumed it was childish imagination. Harmon sighed impatiently. Mrs. Chen, with all due respect, this meeting is supposed to be about facts and policy, not a child's fantasy about— The lights in the community center flickered, then went out completely. Emergency lighting kicked on seconds later, casting the room in an eerie glow. Outside, the clear evening had suddenly darkened as clouds rolled in from nowhere. "Just a power surge," someone called out. But the nervous energy in the room had shifted. Through the open windows came a sound that raised the hair on everyone's necks, the distinct synchronized howling of multiple wolves. Pine Lake hadn't had a wolf pack in decades. They had been hunted to local extinction in the 1950s. Noah smiled, seemingly unsurprised. "They're here," he said quietly. Before anyone could question what he meant, a commotion erupted outside. People who had been standing on the lawn were rushing in, their faces pale with shock. "Bears!" someone shouted. "A whole line of them at the edge of the parking lot." The room erupted in confusion. Mason rushed to the door, followed by several council members. What they saw stunned them into silence. Across the asphalt of the community center parking lot, illuminated by the building's exterior lights, stood not just 1 or 2 bears, but 12. They were arranged in an unnaturally perfect line, standing perfectly still, watching the building. And in the center, unmistakable with her white chest marking, was the mother bear who had saved Noah. "This is impossible," Harmon whispered, having pushed his way to the front. "Bears don't behave like this. They don't coordinate." Eleanor moved to stand beside Noah, placing a protective hand on his shoulder. "They do when something precious is at stake," she said. Rebecca documented it, but no one would believe her. The bears made no aggressive moves. They simply stood, a living barrier between the human gathering and the forest beyond. Behind them, at the tree line, shadowy forms moved. The wolves, whose howls they had heard moments earlier. "It's a message, Doctor," Martinez said, her voice filled with awe. "They're showing us they're united." A flash of lightning illuminated the scene, followed by a crack of thunder that seemed to shake the building itself. Rain began to fall in heavy sheets, yet the bears remained motionless, impervious to the sudden downpour. Noah pulled away from Eleanor and walked through the shocked crowd toward the door. Olivia tried to stop him, but found herself unable to move, as if held in place by an invisible force. "Noah," she called out, but her son did not turn back. He stepped outside into the rain alone, a small figure facing the line of massive predators. The pendant at his chest seemed to glow with an inner light of its own, visible even through his soaked t-shirt. The crowd watched in horror and fascination as Noah walked halfway across the parking lot and stopped. The mother bear broke from the line and approached him, moving with deliberate gentleness until she stood directly before the boy. What happened next would be debated for years to come, with some claiming mass hallucination and others insisting on divine intervention. But every person present would agree on the basic facts. The bear rose onto her hind legs, towering over Noah at nearly 7 feet tall. The boy reached up and touched the pendant at his neck, then reached toward the bear. The massive animal lowered her head until her eyes were level with Noah's. And then, with a gentleness that defied her wild nature, she touched her snout to the boy's forehead in what could only be described as a blessing. A collective gasp went through the onlookers. Gregory Harmon dropped his briefcase, papers spilling across the wet ground unnoticed. The rain stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The clouds parted, revealing a sky filled with stars that seemed impossibly bright. And behind the line of bears, at the very edge of the forest, stood a figure that shouldn't have been possible. A woman in outdoorsman's clothes, her form translucent yet clearly visible in the starlight, a silver pendant gleaming at her throat. "Rebecca," Dr. Martinez whispered, tears streaming down her face as she recognized her long-dead aunt. The apparition raised her hand in greeting or warning, no one could be sure which, then faded into the darkness of the trees. One by one the bears turned and followed, melting into the forest until only the mother bear remained. She dropped back to all fours, gave Noah one final look, then disappeared after the others. The wolves' howls rose once more, then faded into silence. Noah turned and walked back to the stunned crowd, his clothes dripping, but his eyes bright with a wisdom far beyond his years. "They've been protecting the forest since before people came here," he said simply. "The bear lady says they'll keep doing it, with or without our help, but it would be better if we helped." Councilwoman Green was the first to recover her voice. "This meeting is adjourned," she announced shakily. "The council will reconvene tomorrow to reconsider the logging proposal in light of new evidence." Harmon didn't object. He was still staring at the forest edge, his face ashen. "In 30 years of timber business," he mumbled, that wasn't natural." "No," Mason agreed quietly. "It wasn't natural. It was something more." The logging proposal was unanimously rejected the next day. Within a week, Gregory Harmon announced that Northwest Timber was donating 2,000 acres of previously purchased forest land back to the state as a protected wildlife sanctuary. When pressed by shareholders about this unexpected decision, he would only say that some experiences changed a person's priorities. The story of the Bear Assembly, coming 6 months after the miraculous rescue, catapulted Pine Lake into the national spotlight. Wildlife biologists, paranormal researchers, and curious tourists flooded the small town. Dr. Martinez established the Rebecca Wilson Research Center at the edge of the newly protected land, dedicated to studying interspecies communication and animal cognition. The center's logo, a silver bear paw print, became recognized in scientific communities worldwide. For Olivia and Noah, life took an unexpected turn. The quiet accounting job she had left behind in Seattle no longer called to her. Instead, she found herself working alongside Mason and Dr. Martinez, documenting the extraordinary behaviors of the Pine Lake wildlife. Noah started school in the local elementary, where he became known for his unusual insight into animal behavior and his uncanny ability to predict where the bears would appear. The pendant never left his neck, and his conversations with the bear lady continued, though less frequently as he grew older. Eleanor Walsh lived 3 more years, long enough to see her paintings of Rebecca and the bears displayed in the Smithsonian alongside excerpts from the recovered journal. Before she died peacefully in her sleep, she completed one final canvas. A young boy standing between 2 worlds, a silver pendant connecting him to both. One crisp autumn evening, 4 years after the community center incident, Olivia and Noah sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and crimson. At 10 years old, Noah had grown tall and thoughtful, his connection to the forest evident in his quiet confidence and deep respect for the natural world. "Mom," he said suddenly, "I need to tell you something." Olivia recognized the serious tone. "What is it, sweetheart?" "The bear lady doesn't come to talk to me anymore," he said, his fingers absently touching the pendant. "She says her work is done." "Done?" Olivia asked gently. Over the years, she had come to accept Noah's mysterious connection to Rebecca Wilson's spirit, whatever it might truly be. Noah nodded. "She says the balance is restored. The bears remember who helped them, and people remember to respect the forest." He looked out toward the trees where the evening shadows were deepening. "But she also said something is coming. Something that will test everything we've learned." Olivia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. Did she say what it is? Number just that I'll recognize it when it happens. Noah's eyes reflected the sunset as he gazed across the lake. And that I'll know what to do when the time comes. Before Olivia could question him further, the radio inside the cabin crackled to life, an emergency broadcast breaking through the evening music. "Attention, all Pine Lake residents," Mason's voice announced, tense but controlled. "This is Ranger Reed. We have reports of a major forest fire approaching from the north. Evacuation procedures are now in effect. Please proceed to designated safety zones immediately. This is not a drill." Noah stood up, suddenly alert. "This is it," he said with absolute certainty. This is what she meant. Olivia was already gathering emergency supplies, her mind racing through evacuation protocols. "Noah, get your emergency kit. We need to—" "No," he interrupted, with a firmness that stopped her mid-sentence. "We can't leave. The animals will have nowhere to go." He touched the pendant again, his eyes distant as if listening to a voice only he could hear. "The bears can help, but they need us too. Noah, this is a forest fire. We can't stay here. Trust me, Mom," he pleaded, his eyes intense, "like you trusted me at the community center. Remember what happened then?" Olivia hesitated, torn between maternal instinct and the undeniable truth that her son had some connection to forces she couldn't fully comprehend. Outside, the first evacuation vehicles were moving along the road, loaded with frightened residents. Her phone rang, Mason calling to check on them. She answered quickly. "Mason, how bad is it?" she asked, watching Noah, who was now standing at the edge of their yard, looking toward the forest with unusual focus. "It's moving faster than predicted," Mason replied, the sound of emergency equipment audible in the background. "The wind shifted. You need to get out now, Olivia." "Noah thinks," she began, then stopped, unsure how to explain. "Noah believes there's another way." A brief silence on the line. Mason had witnessed enough over the past 4 years to take such statements seriously. "What does he want to do?" "I'm not sure yet, but it has something to do with the bears." More silence then. "I'm coming to you." "Don't do anything until I get there." As Olivia hung up, she noticed something extraordinary. From the tree line emerged the mother bear, older now but still recognizable by the white marking on her chest. Behind her came others, dozens of bears moving with purposeful coordination that still sent shivers down Olivia's spine when she witnessed it. But tonight, the bears weren't alone. Deer moved alongside them, along with wolves, foxes, and countless smaller creatures. It was as if the entire forest population was evacuating together in an organized procession. Noah walked down to meet them, stopping at the edge of the property. The mother bear approached him directly, and for the first time in years, Olivia saw the silver object hanging from the leather cord around the bear's neck, a match to Noah's pendant. "They need to go through our property to reach the lake," Noah called back to his mother. "The fire is coming from the north, but the south shore will be safe if they can cross the water." As if confirming his words, the smell of smoke reached them, and a faint orange glow was now visible beyond the northern hills. The evacuation sirens wailed louder. "But how will they all cross the lake?" Olivia asked, moving to stand beside her son. Noah pointed toward the water. "Look," Olivia gasped. Along the shoreline, stretching into the distance, people were gathering, residents who had ignored the evacuation order. Some were launching boats and canoes. Others were wading into the shallows. Dr. Martinez was there, directing a group of researchers who were positioning pontoon platforms into the water. "They've been preparing," Noah said with a smile. The bear lady told others, too. Mason's truck skidded to a stop beside their cabin. He jumped out, radio in hand, his expression shifting from urgency to amazement as he took in the scene. The orderly procession of wildlife emerging from the forest, the residents gathering at the shore. "Noah," he said, approaching slowly. "Is this what I think it is?" The boy nodded. "The fire will destroy a third of the forest. Nothing can stop that. But we can save those who live there." He pointed to his pendant. This was never just about the bears. It was about remembering we're all connected, that humans are part of nature, not separate from it. The ground trembled slightly beneath their feet. From over the northern hills, a wall of orange flame became visible, consuming the ancient forest at frightening speed. "We need to go," Mason urged, looking at the approaching fire. "Whatever you're planning, Noah, we have to do it now." "I know." Noah removed the pendant from around his neck for the first time since it had appeared there 4 years ago. He held it up, and in the light of the approaching fire, it gleamed with an otherworldly radiance. The mother bear watched him intently, her own pendant catching the same light. "The circle needs to be completed," Noah said, his voice somehow older, wiser. "What began with Rebecca must continue with someone new." Before Olivia could ask what he meant, the mother bear rose onto her hind legs. In her massive paw, clutched gently, was a small silver object, a third pendant, identical to the others. "How is that possible?" Mason whispered. Noah took the offered pendant without fear, his small hand steady as it met the bear's paw. "Rebecca made 3 pendants, not 2, he explained. "One for herself, one for Alma, and one for whoever would come after her." The sky above them darkened with smoke, embers beginning to float down like fiery snow. The procession of animals continued past them toward the lake, where humans waited to help them cross to safety. "What do we do?" Olivia asked, coughing as the smoke thickened. Noah handed her the third pendant. "This is yours now, Mom. You'll know what to do with it when the time comes." He smiled, the same innocent smile he'd had as a toddler, before the lake and the bear and all that came after. "The bear lady says you've been part of this all along. You just didn't know it yet." Olivia slipped the pendant over her head, feeling its weight settle against her chest. The moment it touched her skin, a strange calm washed over her, a certainty that transcended fear. "We need to help them cross," she said, the words coming from somewhere beyond conscious thought. "All of them, before the fire reaches the shore." For the next 3 hours, as the forest burned and firefighters fought desperately to create breaks, an extraordinary scene unfolded at Pine Lake. Locals used boats, rafts, floating platforms, anything that could carry wildlife across the water to safety. Bears swam alongside canoes carrying fox kits and baby raccoons. Deer were guided to the narrowest crossing points. Birds filled the sky above them, their normal fear of humans temporarily suspended in the face of greater danger. And through it all, 3 pendants gleamed in the firelight. One around Olivia's neck, one around Noah's, and one carried by a bear who had once saved a drowning child and now led her kind to safety once more. By dawn, the fire had consumed nearly 5,000 acres of forest, but had finally been contained by the natural barrier of the lake and the tireless work of firefighters. On the south shore, an impossible gathering of wildlife and humans coexisted in exhausted harmony. Dr. Martinez moved among them, documenting with quiet awe what she knew would redefine humanity's understanding of animal cognition and interspecies cooperation. Olivia found Noah sitting on a rock by the water's edge, the mother bear resting nearby as if standing guard. Her son looked tired but peaceful, watching the smoke rise from the distant forest. "Noah," she said softly, sitting beside him. "What happens now?" He smiled, wisdom and childish innocence somehow coexisting in his expression. "Now we rebuild, together." He gestured toward where animals and humans shared the shoreline. "The forest will grow back stronger, and the bears will remember what happened here today." Olivia touched her new pendant, feeling its connection to her sons, to the bears, and to a woman who had died decades ago believing in something no one else could see. "The bear lady says she won't be coming back anymore," Noah added, a hint of sadness in his voice. "She says her work is really finished now. The circle is complete." As if in response to his words, a shimmer appeared in the early morning light, a translucent figure standing at the edge of the burned forest. Rebecca Wilson smiled at them, raised her hand in farewell, and faded into the light of the rising sun. The mother bear watched the spot where the apparition had stood, then lowered her massive head onto her paws with a deep, contented sigh. Her task, too, was complete. Mason approached them, radio in hand. "They're calling it a miracle," he said, his voice rough from smoke and exhaustion. "No human casualties, and wildlife experts are saying the coordinated evacuation of so many species is, well, they're saying it's impossible." "Not impossible," Olivia replied, her fingers still touching the pendant. "Just unexplainable by what we thought we knew." From the distance came the sound of a helicopter's news crews arriving to document the aftermath. Soon, the world would see what had happened at Pine Lake, though whether they would understand was another question entirely. Noah stood up, brushing dirt from his jeans. "We should help with the animals," he said, practical now in a way that reminded Olivia he was still, beneath it all, a 10-year-old boy. "Dr. Martinez needs people who can speak bear." He grinned, a flash of childhood mischief breaking through the solemnity of the night's events. Olivia laughed, feeling tension release from her shoulders. "I'm not sure I'm fluent yet." "You will be," Noah assured her. "The pendant helps." The mother bear rose to her feet, shook herself, and moved toward the gathered wildlife with purpose. Noah followed, and after a moment's hesitation, Olivia did too. As they walked together, woman, child, and bear, Olivia felt something shift within her understanding of the world. The boundaries between human and animal, between science and mystery, between life and death, seemed less rigid than she had once believed. The forest would heal, the animals would return, and the story of Pine Lake would become legend, a tale of bears who saved humans and humans who saved bears, of pendants that connected worlds, and of a child who had stood at the crossroads between them. Some would call it a miracle. Others would search for scientific explanations. But for those who had been there, who had witnessed the impossible with their own eyes, the truth was both simpler and more profound. In a world that often separated humans from nature, they had rediscovered what it meant to be part of something larger than themselves. And in the hearts of those who wore the silver pendants, human and bear alike, the knowledge would remain that some mysteries are meant to be experienced rather than explained. Some bridges, once built, can never be torn down, and some stories, once they become part of the fabric of a place, continue long after their original tellers have returned to the earth and stars from which all life begins. Across the lake, the first green shoots were already emerging from the blackened forest floor, the eternal cycle of renewal beginning again. And around the neck of a child who had nearly drowned and been saved by a bear, a silver paw print gleamed in the morning light, a simple reminder that sometimes the most important connections are the ones we never expected to make. 10 years later, a young man stood at the edge of Pine Lake, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson. At 20 years old, Noah Chen had grown tall and strong, his eyes still holding that same quiet wisdom that had appeared after his miraculous rescue. The forest had regrown more lush and vibrant than before. Where once blackened trunks had stood in silent testimony to destruction, now towering pines and lush undergrowth thrived. The Rebecca Wilson Wildlife Sanctuary had expanded to cover most of the lake's shoreline, becoming a model for human-wildlife coexistence studied around the world. Noah touched the silver pendant that still hung around his neck, feeling its familiar weight, a constant companion through childhood, adolescence, and now early adulthood. Beside him, Olivia's pendant gleamed as well, the two catching the last rays of sunlight. "Do you think she knows?" Noah asked softly, looking out over the water. Olivia followed his gaze to where, in the distance, a mother bear and two cubs foraged peacefully along the opposite shore. The white marking on the bear's chest was visible even from afar. The fourth generation descended from Alma, the bear Rebecca Wilson had saved so long ago. "I think she knows," Olivia replied, slipping her arm around her son's shoulders. "I think they all do." Behind them came the sound of footsteps on the path. Mason approached, now silver at the temples, but still strong in his ranger uniform. Beside him walked Doctor Martinez, clipboard in hand as always, and a group of students from the research center. "There's someone here who wanted to meet you before the ceremony," Mason said, gesturing to an elderly man who hung back slightly from the group. Noah turned, curious. The man stepped forward, his movements hesitant, his eyes filled with something like wonder as they fixed on Noah's pendant. "You probably don't remember me," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm Gregory Harmon." Noah's eyes widened in recognition. "The timber CEO from the town meeting." Harmon nodded. "That night changed everything for me. I've spent the last decade funding wildlife research and forest preservation." He gestured toward the students with their research equipment. "These are the first recipients of the Harmon Foundation Scholarship for Interspecies Communication Studies." Olivia smiled. "We've come a long way from that night." "That's actually why I'm here," Harmon said, reaching into his pocket. "When I was cleaning out my late mother's estate last month, I found something impossible." He opened his hand to reveal a small, tarnished object. Noah stepped closer, his breath catching in his throat. It was another silver pendant, identical to the ones he and his mother wore, identical to the one the mother bear carried. "My mother never told me where it came from," Harmon explained. "She just said it had been in our family for generations, that it was somehow connected to the bears of this region. I never paid attention to those stories until—" He gestured vaguely toward the forest, unable to put into words the supernatural display he had witnessed a decade earlier. Noah took the pendant carefully. As his fingers closed around it, something extraordinary happened. His own pendant began to glow with a soft blue light, as did Olivia's. Across the lake, the mother bear lifted her head suddenly, looking directly toward them. "That makes 4, Noah whispered. "The circle keeps growing," the students murmured in amazement, frantically documenting what they were witnessing. Dr. Martinez stepped forward, her scientific curiosity battling with reverence. "It's just like the journals described," she said softly. "Rebecca wrote that the indigenous people who originally made these pendants believed they were conduits, bridges between the human and animal worlds." As if summoned by her words, more bears emerged from the forest across the lake, dozens of them, moving to stand along the shoreline just as they had the night of the fire. Behind them came wolves, deer, foxes, all arranged in an impossible gathering that defied natural behavior. And between them moved a shimmer of light that gradually took form, the translucent figure of Rebecca Wilson, visible to all present. The students gasped. Dr. Martinez dropped her clipboard. Even Mason, who had seen many extraordinary things over the years, whispered a prayer of astonishment. Rebecca smiled at them across the water, then raised her hand toward the sky. Everyone present followed her gesture upward. Above them, the evening sky had transformed. The aurora borealis, never before seen this far south, danced in brilliant waves of green, blue, and purple. Within its lights, shapes moved. Bears, wolves, eagles, all formed from the cosmic display. Tears streamed down Olivia's face. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Noah stepped to the water's edge, the fourth pendant still in his hand. "It was never just about saving one child, was it?" he called across the lake. "It was about saving all of us, reminding us who we really are." Rebecca's apparition nodded, then pointed to Harmon. Noah turned and held out the fourth pendant to the former timber CEO. "I think this is meant for you now," he said gently. "The circle needs to keep growing." With trembling hands, Harmon accepted the pendant and placed it around his neck. The moment it touched his skin, it began to glow with the same soft blue light as the others. Across the lake, Rebecca's figure seemed to grow brighter. She raised both hands now, and a wave of light spread outward from her in all directions, passing through animals, trees, humans, connecting them all in a momentary web of radiance that seemed to reveal the underlying unity of all living things. Every person present felt it, a profound sense of belonging, of connection to each other and to the natural world. Some wept openly, others stood in silent awe, but all were changed by what they experienced. As the light faded, Rebecca's figure began to dissolve. But before she vanished completely, her voice reached them, not through air, but directly in their hearts. "Remember." Just that one word, carrying the weight of ancient wisdom and future hope. The mother bear across the lake rose onto her hind legs, her pendant gleaming in the last rays of sunlight. She let out a sound that was neither a roar nor a growl, but something older, a call that seemed to resonate with the very pulse of the earth. Noah, Olivia, Mason, Dr. Martinez, Harmon, and all the students instinctively stepped into the shallow water of the lake, drawn by something beyond rational thought. On the opposite shore, the gathered wildlife did the same. As the aurora continued to dance overhead, humans and animals stood united by water and sky, by 4 silver pendants, and by a story that had begun with one woman's belief that the divisions between species were never as fixed as humanity had imagined. Noah looked down at his reflection in the water, remembered a frightened toddler sinking beneath the surface, remembered powerful jaws lifting him to safety. He thought of all that had followed, the mysteries revealed, the bridges built, the forest saved twice over. "One rescue can change everything," he said softly, his words carrying across the still water. "One connection can heal a world." The mother bear lowered herself back to all fours, gave one final look at the gathered humans, then turned and led the assembled wildlife back into the forest that would forever be their shared sanctuary. As darkness fell completely over Pine Lake, the 4 pendants continued to glow with an inner light that needed no sun, a reminder that some connections, once forged through courage and compassion, transcend time, species, and even death itself. And in that sacred twilight between day and night, between civilization and wilderness, between science and mystery, the true miracle of Pine Lake revealed itself once more. That in saving each other we ultimately save ourselves. Noah smiled up at the stars now appearing overhead, feeling the pendant warm against his skin. No longer a burden of responsibility, but a testament to possibility. "Thank you," he whispered to the night, to the bears, to a woman who had died believing in something greater than herself, From deep within the forest came an answering call, a mother bear's gentle chuff that sounded, to those who had learned to listen with